So, hello and welcome to 4Panel. These aren't the voices you're used to hearing on 4Panel, though.
4Panel. Sounds weird even saying that or being on that.
I know. I mean, I wasn't even... I was on there fairly recently reviewing the TV series Watchmen, but before that, it had been ages.
You watched a TV, Graham?
I did a whole telly.
You're a betrayer.
But no, this is Graham and Rob from Cinema Eclectica, and we are taking over your 4-panelage this week as part of the Geek Show's crossover event.
Yes. This is weird, but it's a fun little distraction, isn't it?
Crisis on Infinite Podcasts, we'll call it.
Yes, that wasn't bad in the comic books at all or anything. So what have we got for this week?
Well, there has been this regular feature this year. I don't know what it's called, but that's okay, because neither do the hosts of 4Panel, judging by the last episode, where they watch comic book-related media, TV shows and movies. And we thought, well, we'd like to do that, but we'd like to go a bit deeper, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of deep cuts.
Yeah.
As far as comic book movies go. You can also go quite classy, History of Violence is a comic book movie.
History of Violence we considered. Ghost World we considered.
Road to Perdition?
Road to Perdition is, yeah.
They're classy movies there, but we're not going classy.
We really aren't. We're going back to 1968 for Mario Bava's Danger Diabolique.
Odd cat, Mario Bava. I think history has painted him as a horror director.
Yeah, and in fairness, that was the bulk of what he did, I think.
Oh, he did lots of stuff for hire. He's got like a Hercules movie. He's got all sorts of things. Because that was sort of what they did in Italy in the 1960s and 70s. There were genres which were popular, but they just basically did whatever.
Essentially, yeah.
Because there's Eric the Viking as well, which is a rip-off of the Vikings.
Right.
Which, I think there's a review of that on the website, which is a weird movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did a comic book movie.
He did, and it's based on an Italian comic that exists in a very particular kind of Italian comics genre, where if you know Italian comics, you will know of this kind of comics focused on supervillains, I guess, that would be the way that you'd term them.
Or you could head it, talk about it straight on, it's just a Bond rip-off.
It's a Bond rip-off, but where the fact that Bond is a total jerk is part of what the movie's going for, rather than just an accidental byproduct of Ian Fleming's source novels.
This is different.
Yeah. It's based on the comic book series Diabolique by Angela and Luciana Guisani. It stars, what's the dude's name? John Philip Law, who's a pretty familiar name if you watch too many spaghetti westerns, as I do.
Okay.
And he plays Diabolique, the world's greatest jewel thief.
Well, that's a debate, isn't it?
I mean, in the movie, he's the world's greatest jewel thief. That's what they say. I'm not sure whether the on-screen evidence tallies with that.
Yeah, I don't know how to approach this. It's not really... He's a jewel thief, and he wants to steal some jewels, and there's some cops who want to arrest him.
Yeah.
That's the story.
And one of the cops is Michel Piccoli, who, if you watch a lot of too many French movies, as I do, you will know him from all sorts of stuff, from Renoir's Diary of a Chambermaid, from Bunwell's Belle de Jour, from Godard's Contempt. He got around author-wise.
Oh, this movie, though, it's kind of hard to process. I mean, you can say this for a lot of Italian movies, but it's just a sequence of things that happen.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, there's always a visual sense of identity, a visual flourish there, which makes you think, there's a scene, that is a fantastic looking scene, that was brilliant. What's happening? I don't know, but I really like how it looks. And that's kind of the overall, just the feeling of this movie. There's some really odd sequences with transitions and maps and animated bits to introduce his love interest. Although I doubt he has love interests, really, given the sort of character he is.
There is one bit towards the start of this movie that just encapsulates it for me and made me laugh so much, where the detectives are discussing what Diabolik has done with the $10 million that he's just stole. And one of them says, I don't think he'll have just transferred them out of the country. It'll be something that only a brilliant mind like his could think of. And then it cuts to Diabolik having sex on a big pile of money, which, I put it to you, is not the sort of thing that you need a genius mind to think of. Even Rainier Wolfcastle from The Simpsons thought of that one.
It's not like thoughtful investment, is it, in the stock market?
Oh.
But it's really odd, because one thing we've not mentioned is how the character Diabolik looks. I mean, yeah, obviously he's an old guy, but when he's in Diabolik mode, he's in a gimp suit. Is the only way to say it. Head to toe in leather. It's kind of like the Shadow, I think, his mask. So it's got like a little cut out with the eyes, like a leather gimp ninja.
Yeah.
Either way.
And it reminded me of something that I don't think has really been present in the modern kind of culturally dominant era of superhero movies. It reminded me of that sort of Tim Burton's Batman era attitude that superheroes are a bit pervy, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if his costume wasn't enough, his relationship with his love interest is... dominating would, I think, be a fair word.
Yeah, I mean, she is Eva Kant is the character's name, played by Marissa Mell. It would be fair to say an absolute kind of 60s Dolly Bird stereotype.
Yeah. It's the sort. I mean, one thing I remember. It's a left turn here, but there was a female character in Tokyo Tribe, and they introduced the different districts and the different gangs through tracing a knife through her topless torso. That's the sort of level this operates on.
That could have come straight out of Danger Diabolik, couldn't it? Because there's the bit with the cigarette.
Yeah.
Which is very similar. What I'm saying is it's a masterpiece of horny on main account cinema.
Oh yeah, but it's like really good looking horny cinema. Because it has like this pop art sensibility, so it's very, very colourful, bold images that are happening here. The world design, and he's like a 6-year-old boy with some of his things, his inventions. He basically, remember that kid on the playground where you were playing cops and robbers? He said, "No, you can't get me. I've got a force field. No, you can't get me. I've got a magic. I've got a magic
belt. That's it. I've got a magic belt.
I've got tablets that make things not stick to me, so you can't put handcuffs on me.
I've got a switch, right, and when I flick it, it makes me God."
Yeah, that's basically who Diabolik is. You can't catch him because he's got like, what was that gag in? Oh, it wasn't. I don't know if it was positioned as a gag, but in the original Batman movie, where he's got like bat shark repellent.
Yeah. And this is very similar to those old Adam West Batmans, isn't it, in a lot of ways?
Yeah, although I think it would have been improved by having Dick Watson, holy something Batman, do literally everything that happened. It is literally the level it is pitched at. It's quite bizarre.
I mean, it doesn't have Burt Ward, but it does have Terry Thomas, and that's something.
Yeah, the guy's so interesting. He doesn't have a name. He has 2 hyphen names.
Yes. How did Terry Thomas end up in an Italian comic book movie from the director of Blood and Black Lace?
I think we can look into only Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for that sort of origin story. His career was on the down low, so like Al Pacino turned up, even though he probably would have been quite young then.
Yes.
Teenage Al Pacino turned up, did a horrible Jewish stereotype, and then off he went to Italy to do some stuff.
Because Terry Thomas is quite delightful in this, but he does open up the question of where is this movie set? It seems to be in the United Fratelli.
Yeah, that's true. That's true of a lot of Italian stuff, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's lots of American actors in this.
Yeah.
Sharing scenes of Italian actors, and they don't share the same tongue. Yeah. So you have this thing where often there's weird chemistry Because there's lots of Italian movies with John Saxon in,
Yeah.
and he doesn't speak Italian, but he's in a cast full of Italians.
Yeah.
So they worked it somehow. And Terry Thompson isn't the worst example of an American actor in an Italian movie. I don't know what that would be. Actually, no. I was thinking of a Japanese movie called The Horrors of Malformed Man.
Oh,
which is all Japanese, and it has one... No, it wasn't that one. It's another one. Doesn't matter what it's called. I'll think of it eventually. Where it has like literally the worst like ex-model American actress just really chewing the scenery. She's doing like really dramatic monologues, and it's like she's written them off a cue card. Like she's reading them off like, I have a dramatic speech now, and reading them off the back of her hand or something.
There's an Italian cannibal movie with Ursula Andress in. And I mean, Ursula Andress is not a master thespian at the best of times. She's an icon, but she's not a great actress. And she's having to read dialogue from, I don't know if it was Jess Franco who did it, but it's one of those Italian movies where it does feel like, I didn't know Google Translate existed back then. It's fluent gibberish. And
it's like, so acting is really hard then, eh? But yeah, I don't think Terry Thomas falls into that pitfall, really, because he's a classy actor.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't know, I mean, this isn't our typical audience, but if you've watched like old 1940s through 60s British movies, you'll know him. He's got like a pencil mustache
and a big gap in his teeth, and his niche was that he usually played kind of a cad or a sleazeball.
Was he in Bedknobs and Broomsticks? Would that be his most famous role?
Oh, maybe. Let me just look that up. I know him mainly from School for Scoundrels, and he was in some of the St. Trinian's movies, I'm All Right, Jack.
Yeah, he was great and All Right. I'm All Right, Jack.
I'm All Right, Jack is such a wonderful movie.
But you know his face. Even if the name doesn't sound familiar, you will know him. He's one of those actors. But it's Danger... But Danger Diabolique is such a weird little thing to process. I believe it's been on Mystery Science Theatre.
Which feels harsh, doesn't it?
Yeah, because there's an artistry to this.
Yeah.
He was a cinematographer first there, Mario Bava, and a filmmaker second. So every one of his films has absolutely stunning camera movements and lighting and visuals. And this is no different, really. It has that pop art aesthetic to work with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the guy is an ass. The story makes no sense. And I don't know what is happening.
But this is, like I was saying, that kind of Italian comic book tradition loved flamboyant arseholes. It was basically what they were built on. And it's a surprise to me that so few of them have been filmed, because they are better than a lot of their European rivals. I mean, this is 1968. In the same year as this, Dino De Laurentiis, who produced Danger Diabolique, also produced Roger Vadim's movie version of Barbarella. And when you compare this to Barbarella, I do think this is so much more stylish, so much more confident. They're both dated, but this is dated in a much more enjoyable way.
Yeah, I mean, Barbarella is famous for its opening sequence in which teenage boys went, boobs.
To be honest, once you've seen Jane Fonda remove her clothes, you've kind of seen what the point of the movie is.
Its most compelling contribution to the world is its inspiration of the band Duran Duran. That's a character in there, that's where that's inspired from.
But even there, Danger Diabolique beats it, because as we were discussing before the show, this was the inspiration to the video to Body Moving by the Beastie Boys. So, victory, Arthur.
And a lot of Batman, apparently.
Yes.
The early days of Batman. But it's really weird because he's the it's really weird because he's the hero, but there's nothing heroic about him.
No.
There's no sort of saving grace. I mean, there's a sequence where he's doing a big heist and he jumps off the back of a van and he does the sort of the forward roll that you do in primary school.
Yes.
And he's supposed to be sort of like this character of great elan and mystique and power and intelligence. And he does a dumbass forward roll. Kind of undercuts his whole vibe that he's going for, really.
It does, yeah. It's very weird. Can we talk a bit about the trailer for this? Because the trailer astounded me.
it gives away the ending, much to the point where it has like the thing is he's not really caught, so he's going to wink at the camera, to show that he's really in charge. It's even got that there.
Yes,
it's given away. I'm not telling you what it is. I mean, if you look at the trailer, you'll see it. But yeah, it's
has
remarkable.
This incessant voiceover, which I think has a phrase which gets to the appeal of Diabolique as a character so succinctly, where it says something like, "He robs from the rich to pay his women." So, yeah, that's just who he is, I guess.
So that makes it sound like they're all prostitutes then.
I mean, they're not with him for his charming personality.
No, I imagine he'd have to pay for company.
Had a very troubled production, this. It was originally going to be made by Seth Holt, who was one of Hammer's regular hands. And he was a pretty reliable director, Seth Holt, but something went wrong. Dino De Laurentiis was apparently horrified by the quality of the footage, and when you consider some of the rubbish Dino De Laurentiis put out, when you consider that Dino De Laurentiis was thrilled to bits with David Lynch's Dune.
Yeah, he's not got high standards, really, has he?
So they brought Bava in as their fix-it guy, which is insane. I mean,
he make it look like nobody else could. But with a script like that, well, it's a challenge for anybody.
And a lot of Bava's scripts don't make that much sense, really, do they?
No, he's a purely visual kind of guy. But yeah, he inspired people like Dario Argento, I should say.
Yes.
Who's like regarded as one of the great visualists of horror.
Yeah.
So he's got a legacy there. Great big legacy.
Yeah, and when you look at a lot of the horror films, I mean, we mentioned Blood and Black Lace, but something like Lisa and the Devil, when you look at these movies, they hold up. They are still great.
Black Sunday has one of the great sequences of just, I think it was a headless horseman rider just exploding out of the ground, if I remember correctly.
Right. I haven't seen that one, but that sounds great.
It's like black and white witch movie, which is just full of great effects. First Italian horror movie I've seen that, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I should rewatch that. But yeah, he's absolute flamboyance on the cinema screen. He does every one of his films. I know that's the stereotype. Every frame you could have as a picture.
But it is true.
But with him, yeah, genuinely. Even in black and white, it's still true.
Yeah, completely. So yeah, it was pretty negatively received at the time, and I think even people who love it would have to say they can see why, because it's basically incoherent.
Yes.
But it's just got this kind of energy and this conviction that you don't see anywhere else.
No, I guess not. It's whether you have fun at its expense or whether you have fun with it, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because there's lots of fun to be had through Danger Diabolique.
Yes.
Unforgettable as well.
I would love to see more Italian comics from this either get filmed. There was a film of Satanic, and he has a K at the end of his name too. That was just their thing. And you know that Italian horror film Baba Yaga?
Yes.
That's based on an Italian comic book as well.
Italian comic books were weird.
They certainly were, yeah.
I like how Kay's the tell of Italians comic books in the same way that everything in the 1990s had to have the Z in it.
Yes, yeah. A Z or an X for extreme.
The 90s were a bad decade. So I guess we move us to recommendations, really.
Yes, if you haven't listened to Eclectica before, we don't just like to review our film of the week. We like to suggest something that you can watch alongside it. And I think you said there was one thing that was sticking out for you.
It's a Bond movie, and the one which I always felt was the weirdest.
Right.
I don't know if I got the name right, but is Moonraker the one where they go to the moon?
That's
it. The name kind of gives it away, doesn't it? It should obviously be. But it's the one where he goes to Japan, which I never remember the name of. Was that?
You Only Live Twice.
I think either of those would work because both are so tin-eared and ridiculous.
Yeah.
That it kind of fits in with the worldview of Danger Diabolique.
I think late period Connery is so lovely and strange. I'd put Diamonds Are Forever in there as well, where that is such a weird film. It's like Jill St. John changes her character motivation with every scene. And it doesn't even stand out as the most bizarre thing about the movie.
Yeah, in that era of James Bond as well, I'm pretty sure there's a sequence, a famous car stunt sequence in which it does sort of a barrel roll going over a bridge.
Yeah.
Where a dog does a double take.
I don't remember that, but I know in Moonraker there is definitely a double-taking pigeon.
Yes, I'll have that. That's good.
For me, I've decided to go a bit classier because how could you possibly go any less classy than Moonraker? I've decided to go for a director that I know me and Rob absolutely love, Georges Franju.
Ooh.
He was most famous for his classic horror film Eyes Without a Face, which is a great movie, but it wasn't the one I was thinking of.
Still shocking to this day, too.
Absolutely, yeah. You squirm at that surgery sequence.
Oh, yes.
But I was thinking of his last film, which is variantly called Nuit Rouge or Shadow Man, depending on what territory you're in, which is a big, lurid, full-colour adventure based on... He'd done films that were based directly on old, like, Silent Eva serials. He'd done a film of Judex.
Yes.
And Judex, when you watch it now, is hilarious because it's Batman before Batman. He even has a Judex cave.
That makes no sense.
It's unbelievable. So that's a lot of fun. But for his last film, he did his own story that was in the spirit of those things. And it's this absolutely mad conveyor belt of secret doorways and masked villains, and the Knights Templar are in it for some goddamn reason. It feels like the longest and least coherent episode of the old 60s Avengers TV series that you've ever seen. And it's great. I love it so much.
Two pretty solid recommendations there.
I think so, yeah.
Very different ends of the spectrum.
Well, I may be hungry, but there's always time for the Geek Show.
Have you ever been reading through a stack of comics and thought, maybe I should see what this Arkham Asylum game is all about? Or been playing Marvel vs. Capcom and felt like you were at a real disadvantage since you didn't know who half the characters were? Well, Play Comics is the show for you. I'm Chris, and each episode we take a look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that source material. So whether you know the comics and want to know how all these games work, or you know the games and want to find out where all this craziness came from, go check out Play Comics at playcomics.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey, so films, those are certainly things, right? And if you want to listen to much better film analysis than that, listen to Cinema Eclectica, also on the Geek Show Podcast Network.
So we thought, since we're pretty infrequent visitors to these parts, we would give you a little taste of who we are with some of our favourite comic books.
It's hard to say that because I'm not really an active reader. I went through phases.
Yeah.
I've been really interested. Like for now, or in this current sort of era of Marvel,
Yeah.
I read a few bits, but historically going back, I read a lot of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Probably too much Spider-Man, where it's all just one Spider-Man-y shaped blob.
Yes.
I can't quite discern. But if you have to pick out a favourite era, I know it's obvious, and I know that Brian Michael Bendis has become a whipping boy of this podcast. But his run, which ended up with the introduction of Miles Morales,
Yeah.
was pretty great stuff. Little bit before that as well, I constantly go on about Reginald Hudlin's Black Panther run. Because as far as introducing a character, I was kind of disappointed that they didn't do it that way in the movie, really.
Yeah.
But it was kind of warts and all, blood and all, sort of approach to something which is a bit more sanitized in the movies.
Yeah.
Also, Jeff Lemire's Moon Knight is amazing. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I think for a character who's about 4 separate people, both at the same time and separately, I don't think you can really do a story in that world and make sense of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's Marvel anyway. It's been my currently what I've really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Like, personally speaking, DC's never really chimed with me.
You see, yeah, if you looked at my comic shelf, you would think I was pretty ride or die DC. I've got a lot of Batman, some Swamp Thing, the odd bit of Superman. I do like DC characters. Their movie department is like only just pulling its shit together.
Yeah.
But I do, on the page, like DC more than Marvel, I think.
Well, that's fair. I mean, it's horses for courses, really, isn't it? I think both have problems. Marvel, in the sense of there's one running right now, which is the Immortal Hulk.
Yeah.
It's great, but I think it's a problem with having things run for a long time.
Yeah.
In that sort of comic form. For as good as it is, it'll hit a wall and then it'll come back down and it's kind of, why am I reading this? It'll become great again. Whereas, as far as I understand it, DC much more short form.
Well, I think one of the things that attracted me to DC was, as you say, the fact that a lot of their comics are sort of one-shots and Elseworld tales where you can bring really great creators in and just have them take a holiday in someone else's universe for a bit. And DC was my gateway into getting into people like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison and a lot of the modern greats.
Are you still a fan of Alan Moore?
I love Alan Moore, and I will not have anyone say anything any different. I honestly think From Hell might be my favourite comic book. I know that the old debate about, is it as good as quote-unquote actual literature is a bit of a misnomer. There are some comics that are great because they're not trying to be proper literature, but if I wanted to pitch someone a comic that was every bit as good as anything that Pynchon or Melville or any great author you mentioned has wrote, I would say From Hell is it. From Hell is wonderful.
Yeah, sorry. Manga is also something which I probably have more experience with, to be honest.
Right.
But the problem I've always had with that, again, is they don't really know how to end it.
Yeah.
It's quite common for like series to run over 100 issues. But the thing is that it's always a consistent author.
Yeah.
The voice is consistent, the direction's consistent. That's fine.
Yeah.
But again, it gets to the point where does a thing need to end? Because I'd have no problem saying that Vinland Saga is one of the greats of the comic book medium.
Yeah.
About a group of Icelandic renegades, I guess you'd call them, trying to find the North America, which when they colonised it, it was Vinland.
Yeah.
About Thorfinn and his father Thors.
Right.
Excellent series. Absolutely excellent. But the problem with that, when it's like adapting a saga, it's how much of the saga should be there.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like a monthly series. I know like Western comics are monthly, but I think it's much more episodic in the West.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one thing that I wasn't thinking of when I decided to come on 4Panel was that sort of whole thing of newspaper comics, because they are how a lot of us first encounter comics. And when I was growing up, I was a huge fan of The Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes. When I grew a little older, I became really into Steve Bell's If cartoon in The Guardian, which, again, I think has gone on slightly too long and lost a bit of its edge, but in its day was absolute knockout stuff.
Yeah, although I will have to just shout out for Akira being one of the best comic books.
Yeah.
Just one of the best comic books.
Rob has his hand up. I don't know.
Rob's asking if they tried to adapt Andy Cap at one point, and given
that would be challenging.
The track record of, well, like Phineas and, what was it called? Peabody and...
Peabody and Sherman. What?
Yeah, they did that.
Oh, right, okay.
That was an awkward adaptation on the big screen, and they did lots of Dr. Seuss stuff.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Would that count as a comic, though, Dr. Seuss? It's not really, is it? It's just sort of an illustrated
kind of a
book.
picture book, but I think that falls under our remit. Rob wants to interrupt us again. They did a TV series Handicap in 1988.
This is what people tune into 4-panel for.
It was a different time. It was before people had worked out that beating your wife's quite bad.
Yes. Domestic abuse is bad. Let's not celebrate it in our comic books.
A couple of quick recommendations for me. I absolutely love Jose Luis Buquet and Cattell Muller's biographical comic books, particularly the one of Kiki de Montparnasse, who was a muse and a model for the surrealists in the 20s. She was kind of like a bohemian, except unlike all the other bohemians, she didn't have loads of money to help her through being poor. That was her main mistake. And secondly, I will read absolutely anything, and I want that to carry weight. Okay. Anything that Daniel Close is responsible for.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that's totally on brand for you, yes.
The man is a genius.
I have a soft spot for, like, Image a great deal.
Yeah.
One particular comic, I mean, Saga was the title that put his name on the world and out in the world scene. But his follow-up to that, it might have been follow-up, I don't know, these people are so prolific.
Yeah.
Paper Girls.
Oh, yeah, I read the first volume of that. It was very good, yeah.
It's basically the setup is a bunch of paper girls are out doing their rounds and time travel happens.
Yeah.
And then time travel happens. And then more time travel happens. And then it ends up getting really, really complicated where they end up being chased by these sort of overseers of the galaxy in time travel.
Yeah.
And going back to the beginning of time. And it's all for them through these teenage girls who are just sort of figuring out who they are. Which I don't think it could work on any other platform. And that sort of storytelling is just a great use of the comic form.
You mentioned Saga. We did discover on Cinema Eclectica a bit back that Lupita Nyong'o's favourite comic book character is Lying Cat.
Yes.
What a lovely fact.
But yeah, comic books are great. It's just, they're a hard medium to get into.
Yeah, I find, I mean, you talked about manga. There is very little I can say about manga because I find just the scale of it so intimidating when you want to get into a series, so you buy a book and then you find it's one in a series of 136 and you think, oh, right, I don't care anymore.
And it's also the presentation as well will put a lot of people off because I think the term they use is flopped and non-flopped.
Yeah,
Whereas if it's flopped, it's printed as in, like in the West, our page is from top left to top right. Yeah. Whereas in Japan, it's top right to top left. So it's backwards, it's printed backwards. And figuring out the way that a page flows.
You have to sort of rewire your brain a bit.
It's very hard for a lot of people to get into. So it's like an automatic alienating tool, really, for a lot of people. But once you learn it, it's like with the Oscars. I don't know what was the Oscars, that was the BAFTAs, where Junho Bong says once you discover or get past this little 1-inch subtitle on the screen, there's a whole world of things out there for you to discover. I think reading things right to left is a bit more complicated than that, but it's the same sort of principle.
Yeah.
Once you train your brain, there's like amazing things out there.
Completely.
In manga.
Yeah. Any more you want to mention before we move on to the comics reviews?
One which has always stuck with me is it's a one shot, which is basically just a single chapter comic.
Yeah.
Called Emihara Fault.
Right.
The Mystery of Emihara Fault, in which I'm not going to say anything, but it's like the most highly pitched body horror, which the whole conceit of it is, oh, there's a shape that looks like me, my shape. I wonder what happens if I climb into it.
Yeah.
And if that ever happens to you in life, just don't. Don't. Because you'll end up looking like Doug Jones. Just really long. But yes, that's what I want to end my contribution on this episode with.
I can't follow that. Yeah. So I've got a couple of comics to review. One is one we were sent in from humanoids.com, and it's rather less science fictional than that company name might have you believe. It's Shanghai Dream by Philip Thirault and Jorge Miguel, who I assume is the Spanish version of George Michael.
Well, maybe.
This is a comic which is very appropriate for us to review on the crossover week because it's filmically based. It's based, in fact, on a screenplay, presumably an unproduced screenplay, because I haven't heard of this being made as a film, by Edward Ryan and Yang Shi. about a story from World War II that I was unfamiliar with. And it's remarkable, by the way, that we are coming into the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, and there are still large bits of it that can surprise you, large bits of the history that you're unfamiliar with, even in a country like Britain, which likes to obsess a bit over our role in World War II.
Little bit, yeah.
Just a bit, yeah.
Especially if you're a member on a Question Time panel. Them especially love it.
Yes. Which is odd, because half of them look like they'd have been perfectly happy to fight for the other side.
Hey.
But Shanghai Dream is about a couple of aspiring filmmakers called Bernhard and Illo. They're a married couple whose ascendant filmmaking career has been derailed by the Nazis' new race laws. They are both Jewish and unable to find a job in Germany for that reason. When Kristallnacht comes, they emigrate to Shanghai, which was apparently, a thing that happened, a place where a lot of Jews during World War II went, which I had no idea of.
Interesting.
Now, this is, as I say, slightly before World War II, so the fact that China was at the time under control of the Japanese was not something that was seen as directly relevant to the German situation. That alliance had yet to be struck.
Yeah.
So there's a sense that it's tough, but it's not as tough as back home, is the feeling. And it's a fascinating book. I mean, for a start, the artwork by Jorge Miguel is so beautiful and so delicately coloured. I mean, I'm holding up a randomly opened double page.
It's very striking, yeah.
Yeah. There's a realism to it, but it works as style as well. I love the very narrow kind of sepia range of colours. There are excerpts in it from the films that Bernhard and Ille make, which are done in black and white, and that's a really lovely contrast as well. I found it a really affecting story, and I suppose part of you thinks that any story set during this time period is probably going to be pretty sad, really.
Yeah, I mean, you'd expect that much.
Yeah. But I think it doesn't just rest on the emotional power of its historical period. I think it has real insight into that time as well. There's a scene where Illa's father, a World War I veteran, is confronted by a bunch of Nazi stormtroopers and recognises one of them as someone he fought in the trenches alongside, which is a lovely, precise little detail of how quickly German society had become split and polarised. I must say, at the risk of becoming one of those people who writes into newspapers about how I was watching that new period drama on BBC One and I noticed a type of cufflink that wasn't made until 50 years after it was set. At the risk of becoming one of those dickheads, there is a bit where they refer to the film Tokyo Story, which was made in the 1950s. So, yeah.
Well, it's one of those things.
It's very fleeting. And
I mean, that episode, that TV show on BBC wouldn't be anything, would it, though?
I wasn't thinking of anything in particular.
What's that show called where people just write in to complain to the BBC?
Oh, Points of View.
That wouldn't exist without those people, Graham. Don't take that away from them.
Yes. I have a weird fascination with Points of View. It's just, you do watch it and you think, imagine knowing these people in real life.
Well, they keep actors in work with their mad antics.
Yeah. I think Points of View is much better before the internet too, because they had to gain actors to read out all of the letters, and, getting inside the skin of these characters just made them put on the most pompous voices you've ever heard. It was great. We're not here to review Points of View, tragically.
No.
But yeah, Shanghai Dream by Philip Thirault and Jorge Miguel from Humanoid's Life drawn in print. Very affecting, I thought. The other thing we got is from an independent creator who I've been following for a bit, called Chris Browning, who works from West Yorkshire. He's from the village of Todmorden, but I'm not going to say that because people from Todmorden have very particular rules about how you say Todmorden.
Well, you say it how you like it, and they'll like it.
It's not like that. If you ever go there, you will spend half of your time listening to people say, Todmorden? You can't call it that. It's Todmorden. What's the difference? Do you have to have special Yorkshire ears for this?
This is like the Wicker Man.
It is. Oh, yeah, because Todmorden is a boundary village, isn't it? And they keep changing their mind about where the boundary is. Yes. Wow, that fascinating diversion aside.
Dear points of view, I would like to say that I granted Todmorden, because that is correct.
Why do we record here?
I don't know.
But yeah, Chris Browning has a little independent imprint called Common Swings, which I've been following for a bit of time. He does a mixture of more serious autobiographical comics like Grey Fug, which is about his experiences with depression. He also did a book called The Common Swings Book of Murder, a series of Agatha Christie pastiches where the killer is always, and I mean always, an evil monkey in a fez.
Can't see any problems with that. That's all the win in my book.
The book I have is Warren Bond, Here Be Dragons, and it's part one of the Warren Bond series called Life's Never Been Less Fun. It comes in two versions. It comes as the issue, and also if you pay a couple of quid extra, you get a load of delightfully silly extras like artist statement from Browning, a replica of the title character's library card, postcard he sent, and lots of other little experience-enhancing things.
And it come to you, and it looks like sort of a 7-inch single.
It does, which is very appropriate. It's very musically based. It has a playlist on the back of songs that inspired it, which is very kind of 80s and 90s indie, including Belle and Sebastian, Micro Disney, Hefner, Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Good stuff, really, I think.
I don't know. That wasn't my scene, man. It wasn't my scene.
It begins with a lovely false opening as a poet contemplates a leaf falling from a tree. He is not our hero. Our hero is the man who bicycles past him and gets very annoyed by the sight of a poet in Bedford, of all places.
How dare he?
The opening caption is, "It is November 1998 and a grown man is annoyed by a leaf." Ladies and gentlemen, the Common Swings proudly present Warren Bond in Here Be Dragons. Bond is an irritable, introverted worker at his local council. The first issue mostly follows him around doing his job with all of his strange workmates, particularly Carol, who is a woman who just seems to do nothing other than loom out of the shadows and predict imminent doom for everyone. It's sort of sketchily drawn in pen and ink, but he does actually manage to capture a very expressive range of shadows and different kind of...
He gets the sense of character a lot.
A sense of character, a sense of environment done very simply. And it's got lots of lovely character beats. I love Warren's pleasure in having to go to the archive section. I love the bit where he talks about... he's accused of staying in his comfort zone, to which he responds, "Of course it's true. Why on earth would anyone want to leave a comfort zone? It's a wholly comfortable zone. Think of the cushions. The other non-comfy zones might be awful. An uncomfortable zone. Think of it. There might be dragons or spiders or Tories." So it's very funny and also very heartfelt. It has a smallness to it that I think it brings off quite well. It's very discursive. There is a whole page where Warren explains why all of the bands that Rob has just turned his nose up at earlier are actually very good.
I was a child. I didn't know any better.
And I think it has that aspect where by the end of it, nothing has really happened, but you have a sense of a world and a sense of a person, and I found that very affecting. There is, I think, a second issue of Warren Bond out and a third in the pipeline, and at the end of it, it will be published in some kind of collective edition, but worth keeping your eye on the Common Swings. They do a broad range of stuff, and it's very funny and charming and proudly homemade. And that's Warren Bond, Here Be Dragons.
Very interesting. Especially his presentation.
Yeah, there's real care taken over the presentation, and I like that.
Okay, so I think that wraps us up, doesn't it?
That about wraps us up, yeah. Next week it will be your regular 4-panel with your regular guys, and we'll be shunted back to the environs of Cinema Eclectica.
I don't know how I'm supposed to respond to that.
But yeah, if you have enjoyed us filling in, like I say, that's where you can hear us the rest of the time. We're also part of the Geek Show podcast network and can also be heard on Audio Boom, iTunes, and all of the like. But until that time, that's been your lot from 4-panel. I nearly said Eclectica. I nearly did it. Yeah, I've been Graham.
And I've been Rob.
See you later.